Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Systems and Powers podcast. I'm your host, Moses Parente. Today, we have our very special guest. He is the only distinguished lecturer in all of Queens College and former three-term New York City Council member of the 13th City Council District. Please welcome Jimmy Vacca.
Hello there. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, I'm honored to be the first guest. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you look absolutely great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
What do you do for I guess a workout split in terms of your day to day now that you're out of the council and everything?
Well, my hobby is working out in the gym, so I'm in the gym at least 5 or 6 days a week.
5 to 6 days a week.
And I usually do 2 body parts, a big one, a smaller one, and then I work in 3 days of cardio where I do the cycling 3 days a week, and I watch my diet. Diet is 2/3 of the battle, and I'm very careful with my diet. I know a lot about nutrition, and I try to impart that on my students here at Queens College. If I see them coming to my class and they have Gatorade, they soon know that I do not approve, and I tell them that we have to get a different beverage to make sure that they keep healthy, and they appreciate it. They don't realize what is that it is they're drinking. They don't realize it sometimes. I had some student walked in with a very large Pepsi one day, and I said, "Do you know what you're drinking? Do you know how much sugar is in there?" So he said, "Yes, professor, 26 grams of sugar." So I says, "Excuse me, you're drinking 73 grams of sugar because it's 26 grams per serving, and that bottle has 2.5 servings." Oh no, I didn't realize that, and they didn't read the label adequately, appropriately, and they did not have that Pepsi next time I saw them. I'll tell you that much. So nutrition is an awareness.
Okay, you're definitely not. Oh, all good. You're definitely not blasting any gear or anything like that, right?
No, and I'm careful not to recommend certain products and all. I'm not here for the nutrition companies to make business, but I am here to try to keep my students healthy and to create an awareness. Don't forget, obesity is a major problem in this city. You mentioned I was a city councilman, 13th
Yes.
District. I was from the Bronx, New York, where I still live. In the Bronx, obesity is a major crisis, not a problem. Obesity leads to high cholesterol, leads to diabetes, leads to blood pressure issues. So all of these are byproducts of weight management. And of course, hereditary plays a part. But diet is so important to keep yourself healthy.
I remember this was back when I was a lot younger. I remember when Michael Bloomberg was mayor, and you also served during that time as well. How was the whole implementation of when Michael Bloomberg tried putting those limits on soda bottles, and how did the New York City Council deal with that?
Well, you would think that what Michael Bloomberg proposed was the end of the world. It was not. What Michael Bloomberg proposed was to limit the big gulp cups of soda. Like
from
this.
7-Eleven.
Really? Or when you go to a movie house. And he didn't say you couldn't have all the soda you wanted. He said the size of the soda had to be reduced so you would not have these big gulps. And he believed, as I do, that these large sugar-laden drinks contribute to many health issues in the city. What happened is the soda industry went crazy. Soda lobbyists would come to our doors, knocking on our doors. But Michael Bloomberg implemented it as an administrative measure, never went to the city council. And the soda industry brought a lawsuit saying that Michael Bloomberg exceeded his authority, that he could not implement it by an administrative rule, that it had to go to the city council for a vote. And because of all the opposition, the city council took no action on the measure. I had people in my own district coming to me, and you could tell that they had one too many soda, or maybe one too many servings of French fries, and they're yelling at me. "I want to have as much soda as I want. How dare you think that you're going to limit my soda?" And I used to tell them, you could have diet soda, you could have a diet Snapple, you could have water, you could have seltzer. I'm looking to protect your health. And although the Bloomberg proposal did have some major flaws in it, it did not impact Starbucks, for example, and Dunkin' Donuts, the coffees. And if you go to those places, you know how sugar laden those coffees can be. So
Oh, yeah.
it really was not all inclusive. But I thought that we had to do something and start somewhere. So I was open to considering it, but I got a lot of flack from people on that, and I think so did my colleagues, and therefore the council did nothing. I think it's a loss for our city that we're not addressing obesity in some meaningful way. People would say, Jimmy, I don't need a big brother. Well, sometimes I think you do need a big brother to try to help you. You may not want to help yourself. And you may say, I'll diet tomorrow. I've heard that. I'll diet tomorrow.
That's what everyone says.
I'll diet tomorrow. Meanwhile, they're sitting at a diner with waffle fries. So no, tomorrow's today. And you have to make a new leaf to safeguard your future.
Speaking of lobbyists, and you were bringing that up earlier, I guess now we live in a much more, I guess, populist era in both like the right and the left on sides of either party. And where do you see the Democratic Party going in terms of in the future, since we live in a more populist time now and everyone is rising up and saying that, oh, we want to get rid of all those lobbyists and corporate PAC money that's infiltrating our government?
Well, the populist talk, getting rid of all the special interest and getting rid of the specialist interest money, it sounds very good. However, there are Supreme Court decisions which have prevented that from happening over the years. So the question is, the question is not what do I prefer happen? The question is what can legally be done in light of the Supreme Court decisions. Where do I see the Democratic Party going? I see the Democratic Party going more to the left, and I see the Republican Party going more to the right. And what that means is that the average person, I've always said, is somewhere here, is somewhere in the middle. They have portions of each philosophy that they agree with. So they're stuck. They're stuck in the middle. I do think, though, that there is a real concern in the country about where we're going. I think people are upset with housing prices and grocery prices and the future for their children and the next generation having a good future. So I do think that our elected officials have to address that, not with rhetoric, but with plans. We just can't be attacking each other. We have to come out with what do we propose that's meaningful, that's rational, that can pass. What's a solution? You know, I was in the city council for 12 years, as you said, and many times legislators would introduce bills, and they knew that those bills were not going to pass. But it makes good consumption back home that you introduced a bill. I think we have to get down to business. How do we pass legislation? How do we get things done? And the only way to do that is to come together. The only way is to go into a room and get these things hashed out and to involve people with different viewpoints in the room so that there is a middle ground that is staked out that will get results. And we see less and less of that. You know, it was said Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, the late speaker, the late president, did not agree on many things philosophically, but they would talk it out, sometimes over a drink at night, and then they come back and say, you know what, I can live with this, and I think you can live with that. And there was a meeting of the minds. That really doesn't happen today. And the rhetoric becomes very divisive. On X, some things are said, which I think, in retrospect, some people may regret the harshness of what they say. But when you say something, you've said it. That's the problem, too. That's the problem with responding like this on social media. That's the problem with saying things that maybe later you realize you would hope you would not have said.
That's very, very interesting, because I do see a lot of the rhetoric online, I guess, from both parties, and you can see it in the most recent primaries from both Democrats and Republicans. People who were, I guess, tried to be more moderate, especially on the Republicans and the Democrat sides. Anyone who was not endorsed by Donald Trump basically got booted out of their primary. Anyone who was not endorsed with DSA, the vast majority of them ended up losing their seats. So, and I did see some polls. I remember I saw a poll a while back from the Manhattan Institute. and it was a poll amongst Democrats. And most of the people who answered the poll aligned much more moderately, as back to what you said, that most people actually are somewhat in the middle, but yet online and all the noise that we hear, we see a lot more noise on both the opposite sides.
Yeah.
And you were saying?
No, I think legislating is one thing. You can introduce a bill, and it may not pass, but you can tell your constituents, I introduced a bill. Governing is something different. And that's the challenge the mayor faces. The mayor is our first socialist mayor, and he has to govern. And governing means that you have plans, you have proposals, but you also have to adjust expectations based on reality. So how can a mayor implement what he proposed? You have finite fiscal resources, finite financial resources. It's called a budget. So how can he do all this in 1 year, 2 years? He may have to do some things long term, stretch out many of his proposals. He may have to weaken some of the proposals, not be as inclusive. Governing is much different than legislating. Legislators can propose everything, even if it's not realistic. However, elected officials, I know we had someone running for Congress in Manhattan. She said that she wanted to close all prisons. Well, if the mayor agrees with that, then the mayor will have to contend with possibly crime going up and people who have been arrested and convicted having nowhere to go. So he has a different set of reality checks than somebody who is a legislator who proposes something but can't effectuate it anyway.
So you're basically saying that a lot of the people who are proposing legislation and sit in whichever legislative branch, whether it's the state assembly, state senate, or city council, many of them might just push a bill or introduce a bill just to simply make noise so they could look good back home in their district.
Of course, it's very common. It's very common. And many of them will say, I introduced a bill. No, you did not introduce a bill. You're one of 15 co-sponsors. You're a co-sponsor. That's not your bill. But do you think people are like myself, where I would look up and say, did this person really introduce this bill? No, this person is one of 15 co-sponsors. So the average person doesn't know that that's the case, you see? So I think that we have to be transparent when we talk about what we do, what we've accomplished. Elected officials always love taking credit for everything. I think they have to take credit for what they did rather than what they were part of. What they're part of is part of a group, and it should be acknowledged as such, that I worked with my fellow colleagues to introduce a bill. Let's be fair about it. But that often doesn't happen. And I get that. I get that. Because you could say, I work with my you may be from the Bronx. I work with my colleague from Staten Island. Who in the Bronx cares about Staten Island? They care about the Bronx. You were the one in the Bronx who did this. We appreciate what you did. So I see the disconnect sometimes.
Speaking of making noise, a lot of people who are, I guess, in the legislation, whether it's like Congress or even back down to the state or local levels, it's been more of, I guess, been being used as a platform to essentially expand their brand. And you've seen a lot of more people who are elected officials become, I guess, the equivalent of a political social media influencer. And you see a lot more of that with like streamers, and especially with like the primaries. I don't know if you saw that video of Hassan Piker. He was calling out Richie Torres and saying, Richie Torres, you're next. And it's generating a lot of attention online. Where do you see that, I guess, trend happening a lot more in the future now that this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, you can call me old-fashioned, or you can call me old-fashioned. I listen to some of the words that are in these videos.
That can be quite vulgar.
The vulgarity, I really think up until 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, it would have been like, no way. What did this person say? What language is this? Now I just think we're immune to this vulgarity. I do think you have to understand that elected officials are always wanting to run for the next office. They're always looking to run for something higher up. They aspire to greater power. That's why many people will say, Jimmy, why doesn't this person retire? The answer is this person does not want to retire. This person wants power. This person is not ready to retire. When you have term limits, like we do in New York City, well, term limits means that after 8 years, you got to go someplace. So you have term limited city council members, term limited mayor, public advocate, controller, borough presidents. And when you have all those people term limited, they're going to look to run for something else. They're not going to take lightly that after 8 years they are gone. No, many of them will look to land someplace else. So we've created a stream of elected officials competing with other elected officials, or sometimes what I call musical chairs. The assembly member will go to the council member will go to the assembly if the assembly member switches. Or I'm going to run for this, but you're my husband. You run for that. This has been very common. And we always thought of term limits as producing new blood. But term limits often does not produce new blood. What you've often gotten with term limits is the chief of staff has succeeded the member term limited. The husband, the wife has succeeded the member term limited. So term limits have pros and cons. I do understand the fact that public office should not be an inherited right where you could stay there for years. And without term limits, people will be in office forever because they can accumulate the campaign donations. They have the visibility in the community. They become an institution that's very hard to defeat. Now, is that what government wants? Becomes the other question. So as I tell my classes, there's pro and con to term limits like there's pro and con to everything else. When I left, I never forget, I left City Hall and I was there on December 31st was my last day. On December 30th, I was at City Hall checking my mail. And people saw me, Jimmy, what are you doing here? I said, I'm checking my mail. And then one person stopped me on the steps and said, Jimmy, we're sorry to see you go, and we're sorry to see this one go, but we're not sorry to see that one go and the next one go. So I said, well, I thank you very much, I think. But yes, that's the pro and con of term limits.
At least there were people there who wanted you to stay.
There were nice people who wanted me to stay. They didn't have nice things to say about other people, but at least they wanted me to stay. I mean, and I'm sure that there are people who said, we're glad Jimmy Vacca's gone. So, right, I don't know. But, people will be people. We have 8 million people in the city and 8 million viewpoints.
Well, as they say, you can't make everyone happy.
You cannot make everyone
happy. Politics
happy.
is often a thankless job.
Sometimes, yes, sometimes. But sometimes it's very rewarding. I got a reward out of public service, whether it was the district manager job at Community Board 10, which I held for 26 years, or whether it was the city council job I had for 12. My big rewards, believe it or not, is helping the lady who's not getting her Medicare, who's getting food for people who come into my office with no way of knowing where their next meal is coming from. Making sure people are getting benefits that they're entitled to that they did not know they were entitled to. Those are the rewarding times that I find. And I find it very rewarding that people came to see me who did not know where to go, and I got them to the right place. And they may have gotten lost through the cracks if it wasn't that they came to see me, and I knew how to navigate that bureaucracy for them and get them action. When these people called city agencies, nobody would pick up the phone. But when Councilman Jimmy Vacca called, they picked up the phone. Well, I called on behalf of these little people, and that was rewarding for me.
Speaking of, I guess, rewarding, how has mentoring and teaching been like for you, especially since you started, I guess, serving as an adjunct here in Queens College?
I'm not an adjunct. I'm a full-time distinguished lecturer. But I will say I love mentoring. I start my classes every term, and I tell my students, I want you to know I'm going to give you advice whether you ask me or not. And I do. I give them advice. I get to know them. I get to know their interest. I get to know their problems. I want to know. I want to lead them to their futures if I can. And I do give advice, and I find it very rewarding. I have mentored many people, and I think successfully. But I do it because it's rewarding to me too.
In terms of mentoring, how has been, I guess, the environment been like, whether it's mentoring outside or inside the classroom?
Oh, the environment is always good. Well, you know, Khalil Anderson, the assemblyman, was one of my major projects. He was in my class at Queens College. By the way, he always came late, and I don't think he minds saying I say that. And then one day he took me in the hallway and he says, "Professor, I'd like to run for the assembly where I live." I said, "You do?" My first reaction was, he's got to be on time to all these functions because he's not on time to my class. And then we spoke, and I think he had potential. So he says, "Do you mind if I call you once in a while?" So I says, "I'm honored. I don't mind if you call me at all. I'd like to help you." And that once in a while turned into daily and semi-daily calls. And he won. And talk about being an independent voice, an anti-establishment. He won as an independent in a Democratic primary. It was a major achievement that I give him all the credit for.
He ran up against County.
He ran up against the establishment, and he won. But I've mentored other people in other ways to get them involved in politics. I mentor people in the gym. I'm working out with a guy now. He's about 30 years old, but one day I saw him and he didn't know what he was doing.
You did put me through that ab workout and absolutely killed me, though.
You didn't do the work. You're a power lifter and you couldn't do an ab workout. So I don't know about you guys.
I managed to go through it, but barely.
Barely, and then you were hurting the next day.
I hurt for a week right after.
A week. And I have guys like that now, and but now this guy's taking off. So I like to mentor people. I feel I'm making a contribution, and this goes back to my students having careers that they find rewarding. Many of my students will say, one student last term, he says, "Oh, Professor Vacca, I'm going to be a cop." So I said, "Do you want to be a cop?" "Well, not really, but they're giving the exam and I'll pass it." I said, "But you have to do in life what you really want to do. You're going to be on your job for 20 years. I said, what do you really want to do? What do you have a passion about? And how can college steer you to that passion?" We at Queens College offer so many things, but I find out that many of our students don't even know what we offer. And they're here a year or two. Some of my students have writing problems. I say, "Have you used the writing center?" "Oh, Professor, where's the writing center?" I have students who did not know we have a food pantry. One was embarrassed to go to the food pantry. I walked that student to the pantry myself and said, "I need help for this student," so she would not be embarrassed. I did all the talking because I knew that this student needed food. So I urge all these students here not to rush through 4 years and say, "I've got to get my degree in 4 years." No. Take advantage of what the college has. If you have to stay 4.5 or 5 years, you're 20 years old, you're 21 years old, you have the world ahead of you, but you're not going to have all these opportunities here and all these services that we offer. You should find out about it. You should use them. And many of them do, and I think that they're all the more better for it.
I definitely agree with what you said about college. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, I have to graduate in 4 years." But who says you have to graduate in 4 years? There's no law that says if you don't graduate in 4 years, then you're absolutely done for. 4 years is just it's a social construct that people put on themselves.
Yes.
In my opinion, I think it's much better to graduate in 5 or 6 years, but with internships, research projects done, a bunch of experience, so that way when you graduate with your degree, you are ready to take on the world. You can go into the job market. You can continue into grad school or academia if you want to. What's your best advice for students who feel that still have that mindset of, "Oh, I have to graduate in 4 years"? Because I still see that a lot in CUNY students.
I think 4 years is not written in stone. I do think that students today have to consider what AI portends. They have to look at their degree programs. They have to stand out. They have to have a niche in their programs, a niche. I think they have to have something that brings their resume to the top. If that means staying a little more, you stay a little more. If that means adjusting the courses you take, then please do so. I am worried about the future. for many of our students. And I am worried that AI will shut them out. Maybe not now, maybe 5 or 10 years from now. So students have to look long term to get that special skill or knowledge that AI cannot duplicate or that others may not have when they submit their resumes. It's very important.
A lot of people have many differing opinions in terms of how AI should be used in the school and education. What is your overall take on that as the distinguished lecturer in Queens College?
I think AI should be used sparingly.
Fair enough.
Sparingly. I think too many students are using AI to write their term papers. That should not be the case. I think AI is a resource. I still have students who say, Professor Vacca, the wording that they use to me is like, how frequently did you use the internet when you did your thesis? And I look at them and I said, when I did my thesis, the internet was not around. I had to go and get books in libraries, and I had to find out resources. You know what I did often? I wrote my thesis on community boards in the city of New York and on local government. And many times I would go to a doctor's office or a dental office, and if there was a newspaper or a magazine there, and they had an article that was similar to what I needed for my thesis, I would ask the doctor's secretary, "Can I take this page out of the magazine?" It was a different time. It was a different time. So we have the internet, we have AI. Don't be spoiled by it. Research is very important. Research means that you increase your likelihood of getting a good job. Research skills are never going to go by the wayside. And I do think that people know when you duplicate AI and when you don't. When you do use AI, do you understand what AI is saying to you is the other question. I just think people want an answer quick for their term papers. Do you understand what they're saying? Have you explored what they said?
You think a lot of people have been outsourcing their thinking to AI in this case?
Oh, yes. I think that they've been looking at AI to see what AI says, and then that is their thinking. No. I form my own thoughts, by the way, and I think most people should. And if I teach anything in the classroom, it's critical thinking. I want my students to be able to think for themselves. 1 and 1 makes 2. How did I get there? How did this happen? And that's critical thinking. Critical thinking in the classroom is very important. I don't want my students to memorize what I teach. I want them to understand what I teach, apply what I teach, and use it in their everyday life. And I also tell my students, I teach courses in urban studies, and of course, many of my courses delve into political science too, and politics. And I tell my students, what's going to happen to you? You're going to find networking. Networking, you can't learn networking from AI. Networking is a skill. You have that skill, Moses. You are a good networker.
I do my best, but thank you.
You have that skill, and I admire you for that. But networking means that you can go into a group of people and converse about a variety of things, including government and including politics, not having knowledge. Sports is another good hook. I had a guy that worked for me. His name was Lester. And he and I would go to City Hall. He came with me to my meetings with City Hall when I was a council member. And in the car, he was very quiet. We didn't talk much. He was very quiet. Then I see somebody at City Hall, and he says to me, "Jimmy, your guy Lester, he is a talker. I can't believe him." I said, "Who? Lester? My staffer?" "Jimmy, he knows everything there is about sports." And I said, I got it, because I'm not a sports person. So therefore, my conversations with Lester were not as fruitful as they were. But sports is a good hook. Politics is a good hook. Health is a good hook. All of these things are networking tools that we have to have. But how do you get those tools? Well, you have to have a knowledge. And I teach my students basic stuff that they could use as networking, not just about politics and what's happening today, tomorrow, and next month, but I teach them that conversing, talking, being able to communicate, People think of communication and they say, I could never talk in front of an audience of 400 people. I'm not telling you to make a speech in front of 400 people. I'd like you to make a speech in front of 7, in front of 8, talking one-on-one. All of that is communication. And the biggest part of communication, I tell my students, is listening. Too many people, including myself sometimes, I put myself in check, but too many people are listening, thinking of what they're going to say next. And that's what we should try to fight back against. We have to be good listeners. The most important part of communication is listening, not always talking.
I remember I heard this. You reminded me of this quote by, I believe it was from Gary Vee. He's an entrepreneur. He really blew up a lot on social media a few years ago. And this one quote that he did say, he said, everyone wants like 100,000 followers, but no one knows how to reply to their 13 fans.
Excellent.
And a lot of people, they want the grand audience. They want the ability to know all these people. Have a lot of people have their eyes on them, but they don't necessarily know how to work with the ones that they already have naturally.
You're making an excellent point. Politicians have a grand audience. They're on social media, they're on television, they have thousands. When I was in the council, I was on Facebook, I was on X, I had audiences. But my policy in my office was that when a constituent called, that call must be returned in 24 hours. So if somebody called about their tree falling or leaves were not swept by sanitation, that call should be returned within 24 hours by my staff. Now, as a professor here at Queens, if my students contact me, my policy is within 24 hours, I get back to them. And I tell my students, you are my new constituents. That was my policy in my office, and that's my policy here.
I like that. I think that a lot of people need to should resonate with that by, instead of looking outward and thinking that, oh, I need to have all these people having their eyes on me, especially for people who want to grow their own brand. Look at the ones that you already have now and focus on that and build up on it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one friend will lead to another friend to another friend. You know, it's like saying to somebody, I went to an excellent restaurant. Well, if you tell people about the restaurant, they may end up at the restaurant next week. So it travels. Oh, Jimmy Vacca's office got action for me. Oh, I think I'm going to call Jimmy Vacca's office. My mother needs help with her front lawn dog poop on her front lawn. My mother needs somebody to enforce the law. So people speak well, or people will say, I called Jimmy Vacca's office and nobody got back to me. Don't bother with him. Believe me, people talk. People talk.
Speaking of constituent services, I know that there was that big building in Manhattan that's facing collapse. Well, I guess what's your thoughts on that and how the New York City Council is currently dealing with it?
Well, I don't think it's a matter yet that I know of for the New York City Council. I do think that we have to ask ourselves, what action or non-action did the New York City Buildings Department take? In my opinion, the New York City Buildings Department for years has been one of the worst agencies of the city. Now, I thought I read that there were complaints put in about the construction. What did the Buildings Department do about those complaints? Were they hesitant, or were they late in issuing a stop work order? Did they inspect as construction was taking place? Too often, over the years, the Buildings Department's policy is, we only inspect upon a complaint. Well, I live around the block. I'm not in construction. How do I know what's going on, whether the beams are good or bad? I can't make a complaint. I don't know what I'm talking about. There have to be, when you're talking of new construction, there has to be periodic inspections by the Buildings Department. They should not be waiting for a complaint to come in. And I think that we have to look. This is a long-standing problem in our city. The New York City Buildings Department needs reform, and we have to look at how that Buildings Department operates.
Speaking of the Buildings Department, I know that Councilmember Phil Wong in New York City Council District 30, there was an incident with his staffers and the Department of Buildings over there. I believe it was over on a lithium battery facility that was being built over there, and I think one of the staffers, Bernie Chow, ended up getting injured in the whole altercation. What's your, I guess, overall take on that, and could that have been avoided entirely? And does the Department of Buildings have any responsibility in what happened?
Well, I only know the parameter. I know the overall parameter of it. There was a stop work order, and supposedly the stop work orders were not being obeyed. Well, the buildings department has to make obeying a stop work order a priority. That to me that's an emergency. If there's a stop work order and somebody is working against the stop work order, which could have been true in this case or may not have, I don't know, but that would be a priority. I don't think people appreciate that city council members and their staffers are often in danger. I've stood in the way of many a concrete truck. I've not been threatened the way Mr. Chow was, I must say. My staff has been threatened over the phone because they didn't do this or didn't do that. If you're in politics today, it's often not warm and fuzzy, unfortunately. But I do think that the councilman in this instance, he and his staff were doing their jobs, trying to get a stop work order enforced. And I do not think that physical force makes sense. And I think it's going to end up in the courts. So we'll see where that goes.
One of the things I remember that you said a while back is that most people will never meet the president or vice president in their entire life. But the people on the ground, the New York City Council, the New York State Assembly, State Senate, those are the ones that you're going to be involved with the most and actually dictate how you live your day-to-day life. And there is unfortunately a problem in New York City where most voters are not civically engaged. What do you think can be done to help improve that over the upcoming years and generations that are getting more and more involved in politics today? Gen Z is probably one of the most politically active generations that we've had ever, I guess, due to the rise of social media and things like that.
Well, I think that the point I made several times is more and more relevant today than ever. Many students do not follow politics. Many students do not follow the presidential situation. Now, I would say let's get their head following the presidential situation, but then I would say, as you said, I said at one point, that we have to get them to know who their city council member is and their assembly member is. You probably will never meet Donald Trump or Barack Obama or anyone at the presidential level, but you're going to meet your council member, your assembly member. You can walk into their offices with a complaint. You can email them and get a response. They're in your neighborhood, and they can resolve your problems. The president is not going to resolve what's going on your block in your neighborhood. Your council member, assembly member, and state senator will. So I do think that people have to know who their elected officials are, where their community board is, their borough president. I think because those people are more likely to respond. So I would want them. Now, how do we do this? Well, that's why I'm here at Queens College, and that's why we have civic engagement people in the borough president's office and other places who deal with these matters. But I think that with social media today, there's really no excuse why people can't. The reels just keep coming and keep coming. There's no excuse. Find out who your council member is and reach out and join them on Instagram. Find out who your assembly member is. Go on their Instagram page. TikTok, I don't even know if they have TikTok, but they have Instagram for sure. Find out your elected representatives and connect with them on Instagram, and they produce almost daily product for you to see what they're doing and problems that they're resolving. And they may be the way, if it's a city problem, you go to your borough president, city council member, or your community board. If it's a state problem, you go to your state assembly member or your state senator. And if it's a federal matter, you go to your Congress member. So I just think understanding that is elementary, and then you take it from there.
Okay. Because that's one of the things that a lot of people have raised questions about, especially people in Gen Z. They don't necessarily understand how to get involved civically. And when it comes time for their elections, many of the times they don't know who's on the ballot or how the whole process of government works, especially on a more local and statewide level. Many of them just end up voting president every 4 years, maybe.
Well, I get people at Queens, my students and former students, Professor Vacca, I vote all the time. So I said, you do? When did you vote last? I voted for president. I said, that doesn't mean you vote all the time. That means you vote once every 4 years. And then I say, do you vote in primaries? What's a primary? Hello? A primary in New York City, 95% of the time, determines the winner in November because we are an overwhelmingly Democratic city. If you win the Democratic primary, you're the winner in November. So the primary is probably more important than voting in November. And then, of course, you cannot vote in the primary unless you're a registered member of the party. So that's New York law, not true in other states. But this is what I educate students about. So you have to understand ground level basics about how to get involved and how to be engaged, how to be knowledgeable, and how to have input into what government does.
Speaking of primaries, I remember I saw on X from Andrew Yang. He proposed that we should have open primaries like many other states do, and that it should be an attempt to, I guess what he calls, to moderate the electorate for people who are going into these primaries, because like you said, this is a very overwhelmingly Democratic city, and all of these primaries largely dictate who's going to be your next elected official. And there's going to be a lot of Republicans and conservatives who are coping in the background, but
Yes.
but they have to face the facts. But if a lot of people have been proposing that we should have open primaries for come primary day. What's your, I guess, like thoughts on that, and like can that be implemented, I guess, like on a state level or local level, like
Well,
for a
I
city?
don't think it's going to even be considered on a state level unless the state legislature and the governor want that to happen, which they traditionally have not. Whether they're right or wrong is another question. There is a proposal that may be on the ballot for city residents to decide. You know, the reality here is that independent voters are voters who are not registered independent, they're not enrolled. So if you're not enrolled, you're considered to be independent. You're not in either party, or you're not in any party. Because don't forget, in New York State, New York City, we have the Conservative Party, the Working Families Party, Republican, and Democrat. So if you're not enrolled, you're not enrolled in any of those. I think there's a case to be made for independents who are not enrolled in either party to be able to vote in a party primary. Up to date, and we have over 1 million independents in New York City. There are more independents in New York City, not enrolled, than there are Republicans. So you can make a case intellectually that those independents are disenfranchised. They don't have the right to vote in primaries. The right that people are saying they should have would be to vote in the Republican or the Democratic primary, whatever they choose on primary day. I do think, though, that some people are going overboard with this. I think that many people would question whether Republicans can vote in a Democratic primary. I think that would not be something that many people would favor. Republicans have a party. Working families have a party. Conservatives have a party. The independents are in no party. So from the point of disenfranchisement, I think there is a case to be made for that group. But the proposals I've seen would involve the Republicans coming into a Democratic primary, or possibly Democrats going into a Republican primary. That does not, I don't think that is realistic as something that will pass.
One thing that I have heard and discussed from people who are politically active, I was discussing with them and said this: if people are going to be using state matching funds or city matching funds, and those are coming from our people's tax dollars, so if that's coming from people's tax dollars in general, then shouldn't everyone who is being basically a part of like the tax system should be able to contribute to a primary election. I hope I'm making some sort of sense here.
Well, right now, no, I don't know. Matching funds can go toward a primary election right now.
Yes.
Now, what's your point? You're saying independents have no primary.
Yeah, well, independents don't have a primary, but if independents are contributing to elected officials, especially we all know the
So I
city's
see your
matching
point.
funds.
So You're saying independents can give the money, but independents can't vote.
That's literally the problem. Independents can't vote. Now I understand when people say like, oh obviously Republicans aren't going to be donating to Democrats, at least most of the time, but independents who are not affiliated with any party, and because their tax dollars are being a part of the New York City's money, and that goes to the matching fund system of the primary programs that are going on, should there be a case for independents to actually vote? Because if they can donate, then they should also vote.
Well, I see your point. I think you would need something that we don't have right now in the city. You would need an organized group of independents who would urge independents, don't give to either party until November, because your money is good, but your vote is no good. So that's where I hear you're going. I understand it, but I think you would need an organized movement to promote that independents should not give to a primary person, since you have no right to vote in a primary. That's what I hear you're saying.
Fair enough.
Yes, it gets more complicated.
No, I understand, but it's just been something that's been floating around for a little bit.
And independents often align with political parties.
Oh yes, of course.
Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. Agnes King, the senator in Maine, is not a Democrat. Joe Manchin left the Democratic Party. Those three people became independents. Well, I think Bernie always was independent. Agnes King, I don't know how long he's been an independent, but Manchin, during his last 2 years, senator from West Virginia, became an independent. Now all three of them said, I'm an independent, but I am caucusing with the Democrats. So independents know that we have a two-party system. Where do I lean? And I think the same thing could be said for an independent voter. I lean Democrat. I lean Republican. So I want to vote in this primary or that primary. So yes, there certainly we've had. It's hard, but people have been independent and gotten elected as independents.
Oh yes, of course. It's not very often though. It's usually in, I guess, smaller states with a lot more of an educated electorate that usually is a lot more civically engaged, and they know their elected officials fairly well.
Well, that's what somebody said to me the other day. They said, Susan Collins in Maine is going to lose. I says, I don't know about that. So they say, why? I said, you have to understand, she's a senator from Maine for 20 years, if not more. If you're a senator in Maine, you know everybody in the deli, you know everybody in the diners, you go shopping in a supermarket, they know you. It's a small place. It's 1 million people maybe. The Bronx has more than 1 million people. So you have an opportunity to go to every Chamber of Commerce and PTA meeting and all these little things. So people may have met her. I don't know how many people here in New York have met Kirsten Gillibrand, for example, because we have, 18 million people in New York State? But in these little states, you have an opportunity to meet the candidate. Somebody once said to me, Jimmy, if you ever had to move, where would you move? And I said, you know where I would move? New Hampshire. Now, why would I move to New Hampshire? Because they have the first presidential primary in the country. You have every candidate in the coffee shops. You meet them when you go get a cup of coffee in the morning. For 4 years, you have every candidate. But then I changed my mind because New Hampshire has too much snow and I can't take it. So that was a fleeting thought. But it is something to aspire to meet everybody, shake their hand, talk to them about issues, and they'll be very engaged.
The blizzard that we had early on this year was crazy. Imagine having to live through that every single year.
That's why I said I'm not going, and I'm not going to Florida because of the 95 degrees we had last week. So yes.
No, this heat wave was insane.
The heat wave was insane, and to think that people in Florida have 6 months of it is like a little difficult for us New Yorkers who are not used to it.
I remember when I went to Texas for the first time. I was in Austin, and it was a scorching. The heat was scorching, 100-degree weather every single day, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know how people survive this.
I don't know. I don't know how people go with all this heat, and they say it's humid heat too, so it's just a double whammy. But I guess they're used to it.
Oh yes, and also when I went back to Texas to visit my parents, and it was around Christmas time, so I would assume usually it's a little bit chillier, but I was basically just wearing a t-shirt the whole time, even when I was outside. And for me, I guess living in the city for so long, I'm a born and raised in New York City, lived in Queens my whole life. I'm used to seeing seasons. So
yes, yes, and we all don't like 95 degrees, and we all don't like snow and ice, but it's the season, and we move on. Things get better. It's not 6 months of snow and ice like if you live in Vermont. Maybe it's a lot of snow, or New Hampshire, and then the heat in Florida.
yeah, I would say like in terms of, I guess, a more civically active electorate, especially with smaller populations, it's very interesting seeing, I guess, you have I think it's Phil Scott over there, who's like the Republican governor over there of Vermont. And then you have Bernie Sanders, the independent from Vermont. But then they always vote blue at every single presidential election.
Well, I think being a Republican in Vermont takes on a different dimension. I think he's a different type of Republican. You can't be a very ultra-conservative Republican and win in Vermont. Political candidates are what the voters are. Are the voters demanding a moderate? Are the voters demanding a populist right-winger or a populist left-winger? Politicians sometimes, they put their finger in the air and they say which way the wind is blowing, and then they determine what they do and what they say and what they believe. You know why? They want to win. Politicians who don't win don't have power. So politicians determine how to win. So I often see politicians who I know for years, and when I hear them say something, you know what I say to myself? I know that this person does not believe a solitary word they're saying. And I do know that they don't believe a solitary word they're saying. But they're saying it because they want to win. And the people have changed their views, or the people have spoken, and they have their finger in the air, and they feel they have to do what they have to do.
I've heard a more vulgar term of that. It's excuse my language. They just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
That's true. Some of them do. Some of them do. Yes, yes, yes. But you know how your district feels. You
got to meet the people where they're at.
Yes. I took a vote once in the city council, and they said to me when I left the room, they said, "Jimmy, aren't you going to get backlash in your district about this?" I said, "No, I don't think so." I said, "But if I voted to raise real estate taxes, I would get it." So I know my district. My homeowners would object if I voted to raise real estate taxes, and I never did in 12 years. But if I vote on certain other things, they may be Manhattan-centric, but they're not Bronx-centric. So therefore, but an elected official has an obligation. I tell my students this very clearly. The obligation is always to do what's right by your district, but always to consider what's right by the city as well. You are torn sometimes. So you all know we were attacked in the World Trade Center. So when we were attacked in the World Trade Center, Michael Bloomberg said, we have to have a backup to our 911 call system. The 911 call system is in Brooklyn. I have to have a backup if we are attacked by terrorists again and they knock out that center. How do I conduct business in the city? My police, my fire, my ambulances. So he proposed it. He proposed to build this mammoth building on Staten Island, and they did not want it. So then what happens? He comes to me, and his office says, "Jimmy, we have a spot for it in the Bronx in your district." So I knew that my district did not want this tall, ugly building. And I said to the people in my district on the community board, I called them in, and I said, "Listen, I'm going to try to get it reduced in size, But this is where I have a decision to make. I have to do what's right by the city. I know you guys would rather that we not have it, but I have to do what's right by the city. This is a citywide concern. So I did get it reduced. I supported it. My district understood. Their initial opposition went to acceptance. And I have to tell you, I've not had a moment heartache with this thing since. The city spent $1 billion on this high-tech backup center to the 911 call-up center. And I feel that that was a case. I know this sounds ridiculous, but when I first went to the council, there was a restaurant on City Island. If you all know City Island, 34 seafood restaurants, come and eat, hello. They wanted to have a sidewalk cafe. Now, don't forget, this is 2006. The residents on City Island said, no sidewalk cafe. It's going to mean litter, debris, noise. So the City Island voted no. The community board voted no, because sometimes community boards tend to go with the neighborhood, kind of knee-jerk reaction. Came to the city council. We had the final say. I voted yes. I said to them, what harm is a sidewalk cafe going to do? We put a litter basket out if there's litter. If there's noise, we tell them to close at 11 o'clock. We can work with this. I like sidewalk cafes. And then, of course, once COVID came, everybody had sidewalk cafes, and we found out that they were not the end of the world. They were not a danger.
You still see them outside.
You still see them. So it's like, but at the time, it was people are generally resistant to change. Generally, they do oppose change. Some changes, not good. Some change, you have to be open-minded and see if it can be good.
Funny enough, that was actually the answer to the last question that I had. Like, how do you balance governing for the city and with the council versus focusing on the needs of your own district? And I think you answered it perfectly.
Thank you. Got to do both.
Of course. Thank you again so much. Is there any final words you would like to tell the audience before we conclude?
This was a pleasure. I want to wish you luck. I'm honored to be your first guest, but I think that this format and I think your inquisitive questions will mean that future broadcasts will also be enlightening to those who watch your broadcast. It's exciting to see a former Queens College student and now one of my friends who is doing such a great job and providing this opportunity for engagement in politics, government, and policy.
All right. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.